Hello and welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piskor.
And we are very excited to be joined by Sir Brian Bolland today to look at one of his big books, Batman, The Killing Joke with Alan Moore. We're going to go through page by page here today with Brian Bolland. You guys may know him from his cover work all over comics history. Starts out in 2000 AD, recently with the big Apex edition of Judge Dredd in 2000 AD art, recently seeing print. One of the amazing pen and ink artists that I have ever seen. Welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. Welcome back, Brian Bolland.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me back.
Before we crack into this, I did want to just kind of follow up because we spoke to you before, and at the time, that Apex edition of Judge Dredd had not been released yet. An absolutely stunning, beautiful book. We've looked at it on Cartoonist Kayfabe. How do you feel about how it turned out, Brian?
Very pleased. There are a few omissions. There are a few pages that turned up after the book was printed, which is always a shame. But it couldn't be done better.
Yeah, the reproduction in that is absolutely spectacular. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about before we dive into The Killing Joke is I saw you are doing a cover for another artist edition style book for Carol Day.
Yes.
And I am not very familiar with Carol Day as a comic strip.
No, you wouldn't be. Carol Day was drawn by David Wright in the 50s and 60s in a newspaper, the Daily Mail, I think it was. It was an English newspaper, so you probably wouldn't have seen it. But gradually, more and more people are getting aware of David Wright's work. Illustrators magazine featured him in their second edition because he was a kind of a pin-up artist in the 50s, but then he moved into this daily newspaper strip. And I was snipping it out of the paper in 1965 when I was 14. And I've always loved his work, and I think people are catching up to that.
Would you say he was an influence on your own art?
Well, yes, actually. I mean, to some extent, I draw the actress and the bishop. That is my own pet project, and there was one panel in particular from an issue I've got a few pages of artwork of Carol Day by David Wright, and there was one panel which I didn't know you were going to ask me about. So if I'd known, I would have got it ready. But there was one panel that was beautifully lit. He was a master of lighting. And I did it was an homage to that panel on one of my Actress and the Bishop panels. So to that extent, he was an influence. Yes, I would say he was. Because it was in black and white, you see. So the work we were doing when we started out was always in black and white. So we had to know about tonal values and chiaroscuro and all of those things. And so people like David Wright and Jesus Blasco, who was another artist, a Spanish artist who influenced me quite a bit. I had to know about.
After our conversation last time, we were on some travels. We went to go see a Jim Steranko art show and stopped off at a comic shop and saw some Steel Claw comics at the comic shop and grabbed some of that Jesus Blasco stuff just on the strength of your recommendation. And there was actually a particular drawing inside of Killing Joke that made me feel the Blasco vibes a little bit. It's when Barbara is in the hospital bed, sort of emoting to Batman. There's this lighting on her face when she's freaking out. Right here, this image, it gave me that Blasco vibe a little bit.
Oh, really? No, Blasco used a lot of photography in his work. Not a thing that appeals to me a lot of the time, but you can see that he's working from photographs. He also had quite a few ghost artists. If you look through the body of his work, some of it isn't as good as others. I believe he had a couple of brothers who helped him with his work. But yes, I mean, if anything, foliage. If ever I need to draw foliage, I look to Jesus Blasco's foliage.
I see.
More than his faces.
I see.
That's fun. So we should start at the beginning by saying there are a few versions of Batman: The Killing Joke that exist. We're going to be looking at one of the initial versions here. I have this black and white version, which I highly recommend to anybody at home. This was a surprise to me. I didn't catch this when it first came out, so it's new to me. It's spectacular. Like, the work looks so good. You talk about black and white and chiaroscuro. It really shows off in here. It's a really nice addition. Great reproduction of your line art for anybody at home that hasn't seen it.
That's Batman Noir: The Killing Joke for the podcast listeners out there.
Yes. And there's a third version that has been recolored. And we don't have that one here, unfortunately. But I thought that might be something as we go through. We're basically going to go page by page, Brian, and, point out anything that comes to mind to you. If there's stuff that, you think of that this is something that you wanted recolored, or
leading off as the impetus, like it's recolored. What are your thoughts behind that recoloring?
I spent 2 years drawing these pages. I wasn't working on them all the time. I was doing other things at the same time. And I had distinct ideas of how the colour should look. I'd recently been very impressed by Richmond Lewis's colouring in Batman Year One, and I wanted something like that. I loved that. And in particular, the flashback scenes, I saw them in monochrome. So I didn't, at the end, there was not enough time for me to do the blue line colouring. So John Higgins very kindly stepped in to do the colouring, and then I just waited to see how it would turn out. And Titan Books were doing a kind of printed version of it, and they were just up the road from me. And I heard that they'd got copies of the very first edition of Killing Joke, and so I rang them up and said, "How does the colouring look?" And somebody there said, "Oh, it's kind of garish." Did I already tell you this story?
No.
And I said, "Garish? What do you mean?" And eventually I managed to get a hold of a copy, and I was just not pleased at all. I was very, very, very upset with the way the colouring, the scenes that I thought ought to be like Eraserhead. I was very keen on that film, black and white film. Were in orange. I just couldn't work out why it was like that. It was the very opposite of Richmond Lewis's muted colours, and I'm afraid I hated it. I became quite ill at the thought of it, and I just took to my bed for 2 days. So when 20 years later they were going to do a sort of so-called deluxe edition, I said, "Can I recolour it, please?" Because I now had the computer to work to do the colouring, and so I coloured it the way I always intended it to look, as best I could.
How long did that take you to recolour it?
Well, I did about a page a day. It was over Christmas. It was during the month, a few weeks before Christmas, and then they said we're also including that little 8-page story of an innocent guy, which I wrote Andrew. Would I like to colour that too? And I said, "Oh God, that'll take me over Christmas Day." It was for me, quite quick, really. That's how long it took.
Would you draw this art at the typical dimension scale of a DC comic at that time, which in American terms is 11 inches by 17 inches, 10 by 15 image area?
Well, I have the artwork here for the innocent guy, so I haven't put a ruler against it, so I can't actually tell you the measurements. But you get an idea from looking at it. So what would you say? Is that?
Yeah, that looks about right. That's amazing to see.
Wow.
By the way, thank you so much for sharing that. And that's practical artwork. That's not a print up like you weren't doing stuff digitally.
No, this was pre-digital. This is all artwork. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Thank you so much. What a treat.
I've got about 4 of these. You get that?
Yes. And you're using some zips and stuff on that, huh?
Yes, I was a big user of what we call letratone.
Yes.
Which you'd call zippertone. Is this going to come out well on the screen?
Beautifully. Yeah. Don't even question it.
And I remember what you said, that in the previous interview we did, if I was showing some artwork to the screen and then you started talking, the camera would cut to you and you would be able to see the artwork. So you were sort of apologizing for going quiet every time I had the artwork.
We solved that with this particular thing.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of that artwork is breathtaking. So,
Oh, thank you. Well, I was very pleased with it. I mean, if somebody were to say, "What's your favorite ever piece of work?" I would probably say this is, because it's all me. I can't blame or credit anyone else for it.
On that Batman piece that you just showed,
Yep.
you use Letrotone on the cape. What did you use to chip the dots off? X-Acto blade?
Oh, it'll be a scalpel, a surgical scalpel. I tended to use that.
Amazing.
And another thing, because I use Letrotone so extensively, I think when I was recoloring it, somebody at DC had to go to the trouble of removing a lot of the Zippertone so that I could fill that with color.
Ah, jeez.
Yeah, it was done on a computer, so I can't show you the colored artwork.
Right.
yeah. What you've done is sold me a copy now of the deluxe edition.
Absolutely.
Like, I realize I need that now to reference against all of this.
I've got some of my favorite versions of this book are foreign editions, like this one, which is Spanish, I think, from Planeta de Agostini. Or is that Italian? I think it's Spanish, isn't it? And it's big. It's bigger in size than the others, but it does have my colouring in it. Now, I've also felt uncomfortable bringing this up because, of course, it's not nice for John Higgins for me to say I really hated his work, and I've not been in his presence for quite a few years, 30 years or so. But I was recently at a convention with him and sitting next to each other on a panel, and it was a little bit frosty at times. But in fact, somebody brought to his table a copy of the recolored Killing Joke and asked him to sign it, and he said, "I'm not in that one." So I think he's a little bit prickly.
I feel like that person was trying to put a little petrol on the fire, a little bit.
Something on the fire.
and also, I want to just make shouts like John Higgins. His art rocks. Like, I have a bunch of the 2000 AD Progs, and he was actually an artist. Like, he's a really good drawer.
He's a terrific artist. He really is. I mean, he coloured Dave Gibbons' Watchmen, so that was one of his big deals, wasn't it? But then to discover he's such a good artist as well as a colorist, yeah, it's good.
The color approach to this cover is different than the interiors. Did you color this cover?
They did, because I couldn't possibly color 46 or so pages in the time. I said, well, can I at least color the cover? So the cover was painted or inked in color by me. And so it does look a little bit more the way I would have intended the interiors to look.
The stuff I always would study as a kid, getting this, was seeing that it looked like a practical hand applying that white, and that's before I knew about like the blue line process or whatever. But I'm imagining the Joker's face, that's airbrush, huh?
Yeah, I use a lot of airbrush. I'll have to look at it on my book here. Yes, that's airbrush. A lot of airbrush. Quite a bit of airbrush, actually. There's very little just painted. But I'm trying to think here. It would have been done blue line, wouldn't it? It wouldn't have been done on. It wasn't a piece of full color artwork. This would have been blue line, if you know what that is.
Sure.
And I will say that there are a lot of people who much prefer the original coloring, because that was the edition they bought at the time.
Yeah.
They love the sort of psychedelicness of it, if there is such a word, and are really rather affronted by my version. So it does divide people.
It's a conversation for sure.
Yeah,
it is.
Been a handful of comics that have been recolored like that, and it does feel like it's always somewhat divisive, and it probably is, like you say, which version did you encounter first, and then you have some connection, a nostalgic connection to that.
Yes, that's right. And I'll say another little thing. I've got another little niggle. The After Watchmen, which had this rigid structure of panels, they were all, there were none of these wonderful diagonal swoopy panels that Neil Adams was doing, for instance. It was all very rigid and square. And so I Because I had a quick look through Alan's script just before coming on here, and he's so precise about what he wants you to draw. There's very little left of the imagination. I couldn't believe, having not read it for 30 years or so, how he suggested everything. And I was just going to go on to say that everything was very that way or that way. So when Richard Brunning tilted that little logo, because I designed the whole cover with a rough version of that. That little logo, bottom left, well, it's not just a logo, but all the credits, it was in a square box, like on the inside. And then he tilted it. He didn't ask me. I said, "Why is it wobbly? Why is it sort of tilted over like that?" But it was done by then, and it was in print.
And I think one of the places where you could see, correct me if I'm wrong, the Brian Bolland version of like the sort of design would be in house ads. There were a couple of house ads in the monthly comics that showed off this cover and had kind of a hand-lettered treatment for the Killing Joke piece.
That's right. Yeah, there is a coloured rough of that cover somewhere with the original square. In fact, I was hoping very quickly to find. Oh, there it is. There it is. Yeah, there's a small reproduction of it there. That was my. Is that coming across there?
Yes, absolutely. Along with the great reference shot.
Yeah, there's my ugly mug in there.
and take a look at that, people, because it's not one for one. You look at the fingers on the camera. I just want to dismiss people thinking that you might have traced off the imagery. The fingers are in different places. Like it's just a reference.
I think you're right. You see, the thing is, the mirror. If you're looking at a camera in the mirror, it's in reverse. So the what would you call it? The button is in the wrong place. So I had to pretend to be hitting the button with the top hand, whereas in fact I was using my thumb to hit the button.
Right.
That makes sense. Anyway, there you go. All the details.
All right. Shall we begin?
That's how we do it here.
Okay. I shall turn to mine for reference. My Planeta Agostini version.
Oh, one question, Brian. Based on the Alan Moore script that you were describing, do you know if he had done sketches in the process of writing that script? It's something that we see sometimes where he is, he'll kind of do rough sketches almost as part of his scripting process. Do you know if that's something that he did with The Killing Joke?
No, I've got... in this Absolute edition, they've got Alan's script in here, and it's very heavily written, but there's no drawings in there that I recall.
Brian, is that the complete script in there? Because I might have to buy that before we release this video.
Yes, if you look, those kind of zebra stripes, that is his script.
Oh, I'm buying that.
And the plain pages are the art. So there's more pages of his script in there. I think the whole thing is complete, and it was owned by Joseph Melchior, who's a pal of mine, and he had to scan them all in. And some of them are a little bit faint, and it was done on a typewriter, you see. So, but there you go. Yeah, it's worth having. It's fairly expensive, but it's a terrific book.
Amazing.
Mm.
Yeah, wow.
So cool revisiting that iconic image at various angles and things.
Yes, that's so. I again came up with this idea. They wanted some extra, because it comes in a box, you see.
Yeah.
So there had to be something different when you got on the inside, and so I thought, well, let's see him from the side. The other side of him wasn't so easy to do because most of his face is obscured, and his elbow takes up most of the room. But I had to draw the two roughs with kind of lines, kind of construction lines going across, so that the eye level on this cover lined up with the eye level on this cover. If you see what I mean?
That's
absolutely
amazing.
Precise.
Yeah.
Absolutely precise.
I'll tell you another thing. Throughout this whole thing, all these little bits of lettering on the camera say Joker in several languages. I think somebody pointed out that originally it was in Polish.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Really smart.
I think there's Hungarian on there and various other languages.
Would you have drawn those pieces digitally? Like enough time has passed where you're full digital?
Oh yes, these were done in Photoshop.
Yeah.
This is all digital, so I'm hoping you can't really tell the difference.
No.
Because I'd hate for the computer just to just look like AI or something.
Yeah, that was the magic of discovering that you transitioned to digital, because it still looked like it's Brian Bolland's hand very clearly.
I hope. Well, except for the occasions when I do actually put in bits of collage photographs, which I have done from time to time. Right, what do you want to talk about?
Basically, call out things as we go. If there are things that you remember, one thing I always wonder, were you using templates or anything for rain? This is going to be a motif we see several times, and I mean, they're like perfect ovals. It kind of blew my mind.
And in that case, what would the white media be to get this?
The white media. Now, the thing is, I never used white media. I drew, I used oval ellipse templates for various things, and I would draw them in pencil, and I would ink the black.
Wow.
Really hated using whiteout, so I'm just looking at it on here. So whenever possible, I always, those circles of rain. I don't know whether it looks better this way. Does that look any good?
Yeah.
That would be me drawing the black bits, and not the white bits. Now, the exception to that is that the rain was done by scratching with a scalpel.
Yeah, you could see the ink get. Actually, I'll do it this way. You could see the ink being lifted off of
you can you? Yeah.
Yeah, with the scalpel to give you those like little drizzle drops.
Yeah. There might have been a little bit of white. I haven't got the artwork here. It's all been sold, I'm afraid, so I can't really. If there is a little bit of white on there, then I've got it wrong. But I try not to use white. Starting
with panel 1, though, I always felt like that was a statement, and that statement was even Brian Bolland isn't even going to cheat doing raindrops. Like he's gonna be the same precise level of craft he has in everything else. Something as incidental as raindrops that anybody else would throw down all black and just use a whiteout pen or something. Like Brian Bolland is not going in that direction. And it starts off in panel 1. We have like these silent 9-panel grids of just movement, but so much acting. You see this cop that's either first time he's ever seen Batman, or he's impressed, or he's nervous being in the presence of the guy. And it's written all over his face, which is also another piece of that I love about your work, Brian, is how you can be remarkably precise with the artwork in terms of the drapery, in terms of bone structure and where everything is, but you allow there's a secret X factor in your work that allows for a little cartooning, a little acting, and it prevents the artwork from ever being stiff.
Oh, good. Mm.
Were you using any screen tones on any of these pages? Like some of these vertical lines feel almost mechanical. They're kind of perfect. Oh. And even like the diagonal lines in the top of that first page, are these all hand drawn?
No, I'd use a repeatograph and a ruler. I mean the lights. I was going to point at your screen there. That wouldn't work, would it? Where the Batmobile is turning up, I'm using a lot of straight edge rulers. You call them rulers, and a repeatograph for those sorts of lines. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the one and the bars of Two Faces, Cage, for instance, Cell. Yeah. It all has to be drawn with a repeatograph with a ruler.
I feel like the repeatograph is reason enough to go digital. It's a tough tool.
Really?
and then like you look at this, and there's blunt edges, like soft edges, curved edges on the playing cards.
Yeah, cool. This is very technical stuff.
We're a very technical channel. I'm imagining some screen with the light hitting the wall to create that kind of luminescence. The spotlight.
Yes, Yes, I can see some letter tone there with the just under the light. I would have scratched it out almost completely with the scalpel. Yeah, under that light, overhead light. Yes. Inside this, the deluxe edition is the pencil version of that panel, that page, in fact. So, and you get to see the whole of Batman's body. I had to draw his buttocks and everything.
Right. Like, because you need to know where that cape is going to hit.
That's right. You need to know where his leg starts, really.
I love the little detail of Batman grabbing the chair. You know, when Ed talks about your figures not being stiff but having a real kind of lively movement, that speaks to that kind of life. You know, that feels very real. Reaching out for your chair to pull over, I'm going to sit down on this. Very natural.
I think so. I mean, I always like to know what people are doing. You know, I may have said this to you before, but when an editor says, give us an action shot, I can't do those generic sort of, you know, kind of Hulk-like generic shots. I need to know what people are doing. Somebody was once talking about a Justice Society cover, a trade paperback cover I did, and saying that it looked pretty stiff, and that's because I was just trying to do one of those pow kind of poses, and I'm just not very good at that kind of thing.
Some of the greatest hands ever drawn in comics, and seeing the anatomy, and Brian very clearly understands the bone structure and tendons and stuff underneath that skin.
Well, yes, as I said to you before, you know, I do. I have the reference available.
Right.
But one thing I realized recently was that somebody was talking about drawing young women, and it was a male artist, and he was saying that it's very difficult to draw a young female hand if you're not a young female. And I realized that when I've drawn Wonder Woman, for instance, I'm using my own hands, and I really ought to get a young woman's hands to draw.
I've shaken a lot of cartoonist hands, and it's not too far. It's not too far away.
Okay.
Not too much heavy lifting, not much sheetrocking bathrooms in the career of a young cartoonist these days.
Yeah. I think my hands are one of my strongest features, actually. I mean, the things I draw. I think I once said to Mike Barr, I do good hands, don't I? He said, really? Mike wrote Camelot 3000, and he hadn't really noticed.
Brian, that brings something up, man. Jimmy and I were talking beforehand. I wonder if, when you look at these pages, I'll put it this way. Whenever we look at our old works, we see so many flaws and just like, oh, man, I would have done this, I would have done that. This is a remarkable comic. Like, does Brian Bolland look at his old work and go, why did I do that? That head's too small. Like, are you criticizing yourself on each of these pages, or you stand by the work wholeheartedly?
Oh, actually, I mean, I don't look at this thing very often, but since I knew we were doing this, I got the, you know, this edition out and looked through it, and was occasionally I look at it and I'm rather impressed by it because I probably wouldn't be able to do it today. I think it looks okay. I mean, there are a few panels, if I go through the whole thing, that I think are a bit weak, but there are others I think that are rather strong. So
that's so good to hear.
When you get into this amusement park, did you have to start? Did you have to add to your morgue file? Was it like, okay, I've got to go find all the amusement park reference that is out there?
Well, it just so happened that when I was doing this, there was that amusement park was in Hampstead Heath in London, and so I went there with my camera, and there's a kind of clown in a kind of box in a sort of glass thing, and you put money in, and he kind of does this and laughs. I don't know whether you've had those over there.
Yeah.
They had one of those at this particular fair, and I used him in the. I think actually Alan asked. They were called the Laughing Sailor. But in my case, this thing looked really creepy, I thought, and he was just a clown, and I thought he was suitable. But I found him at this particular fair. Now, there is another thing. We have a helter. Do you know what a helter-skelter is?
I don't.
No.
Well, that tall thing, I'm pointing at the screen, that doesn't work at all. But that thing there, you climb up the middle of it, up some stairs, and it's just a slide, basically. And you go down it in a spiral on a mat, and it's called a helter-skelter.
That's fun.
Like the Beatles song. Have you heard the Beatles song?
Yes, sure.
That's where it comes from. Also, I believe you don't have ghost trains, do you?
Maybe we call it something else.
Yeah, maybe. What would you call that?
Describe it.
Well, the whole thing is a travelling fair, and all of these things and rides and things all have to be built.
Sure.
And then at the end of it, they all have to be taken down again. And the ghost train is just basically you sit in a little truck, like in the story, in fact.
Yeah.
And you go into the dark and ride along the rails on this little truck, and then ghosts jump out at you.
Yeah, we definitely have that stuff. They're called pretzel cars here in the States.
Oh,
yeah.
I've never.
Yeah.
Okay, but somebody said that nobody would know what a helter-skelter was or a ghost train, but maybe the helter-skelter. But you have the equivalent of the ghost train.
Yeah, we got an old amusement park here that has a bunch of that stuff. Real quick, Brian, did you do the hand lettering on the signage and things, or was that Richard Starking?
I must keep the right page open so I know what you're talking about.
See the fat lady, two-headed baby, off in the background. It's the same line as the poster line. It looks. If I had to guess, it's you.
I think it's me. Yes, it is. Now I'm looking at a Spanish edition, so it's all been redone.
Right.
It's very difficult to get that. Although it says "pay in the car," that's still in English. Yeah, I would have done that, I guess, because it didn't have to be, really, really good lettering, did it? So I did that.
Now with our video, brace yourself, Brian, because we're going to the first retrospective sequence, and it is not in a monochrome. And off the bat, I mean, I see your argument easy. Like you set that color palette completely different, and it's different, but like it's too subtle for what it is compared to like what Richmond Lewis did, where she would just have pure magenta sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, can you see this? This is my version here. So
yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
Like old time movie type thing.
I mean, yes. I mean, it was supposed to be like Eraserhead, and my initial idea was to have these little bits of colour, these weird sort of bits of meat popping out of this bowl, and also the fly paper. Do you know what fly paper is?
Oh, sure.
Mm-hmm. It's sticky paper that you hang from the ceiling that flies get stuck on, and that's in orange. So it was supposed to be monochrome, but with sort of hints of colour, which increase as the flashbacks go by when the Red Hood comes into it. Yeah.
So you brought up the Eraserhead. Was this like young Joker? Was he going to have the Eraserhead? Like, is that an inspiration for his hairstyle here?
No, I don't know. I don't recall. I mean, we'd have to go through the script to see whether Alan actually describes his hairstyle, but so it could have been his idea or it could have been mine. I don't actually remember, but there was no. The only Eraserhead connection was the monochrome ness that I wanted to have on those pages.
There's so much subtle stuff going on too with the set piece of it. Like, look out this window, you're staring at a brick wall.
Yeah.
That's not Trump Tower.
Yeah, I was admiring like even the photograph in the background. It is loaded with these details.
Pipes. Like, they are getting the cheapest apartment in that facility. There's all kinds of pipe work.
Yes.
You might got one table that you guys were able to cobble together.
Yeah.
No lampshade on the light bulb. Like, this is a poverty house.
That's right. Yes, that's right. And yep.
Always loved this character.
Yeah.
The little neighbor
the
superintendent.
old lady with the old lady with the one-eyed cat. Yes. Yeah. There she is. I don't know why. I was always quite good at drawing old crones. I did an old crone in Munden's bar once.
Yeah, that's a great strip. And this story is rife with that period of Alan Moore's writing where you have the transition sequences from panel to panel when you're breaking out of scenes. So we have the smiley Joker lady, as it dissolves into modern day Joker. And look at that. There's your monochrome into color.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
No, that was very, very organized by Alan. He described that fairly thoroughly, so that a lot of these transitions from past to present are very much echoed in the before and after panels. Yeah.
Did you deviate from the script at any point, or did you and Alan have any disagreements where you thought, let's do a scene this way, or let's break down panels a little differently?
No. After he started working on it, he went away and wrote it without any input from me at all. He rang me up once in the middle. He rang me up and said he was in a bit of a crisis with it. And I think the crisis that he was in with at the time was to do with his relationship with DC Comics, which had really broken down. And in retrospect, I sort of think he might have been ringing me up to say he was going to pack in and not finish it. But he very kindly carried on to the end and finished it. But no, we didn't have any disagreements at all. I was a little bit shocked to find what he'd done to Barbara and Commissioner Gordon. It was pretty. But I think he wanted to take the Joker one step further than he'd been taken before by Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams and people like that, into doing something really very bad. He asked permission from DC to do that to her, because he put her in a wheelchair for some years, didn't it?
This is one of my favorite pages of nonverbal storytelling, that even as a kid, when I first got a hold of this book, I just studied endlessly. The approach with the Joker, you have the regular human sitting on the back of that little elephant, and just the subtlety of the storytelling in that second panel where you see these silhouetted hands about to shake, and you see just the barest glimmer inside that dark pool of Joker's hand. Just like it could be just a piece of, it was uninked or something. But then the next panel is the reveal. You see the buzzer.
Yeah.
And our guy is immobile. We're seeing him from the back. He's not moving. And then you have the final reveal, and
That's
you see
right.
the Joker face. Look at what Brian did with the face. He made it white with the red lips, as opposed to the old
really
version.
Interesting.
Yeah. I must say, I do find that final panel on the right-hand page, it's way too garish for me. The green and the purple. Why is it so green and purple?
Would this piece up here be a paste up from like some Dick Sprang thing or something?
Closing this bloody book. No, that was not a paste up. That was actually me, because I was a huge Dick Sprang fan. So I pretty much traced that from the back of one of the annuals from the 60s, I think. I will actually just take something off the wall here. If it will come up.
Very excited.
Now, I don't know whether you'll get a lot of glare here, but that's...
Beautiful.
That's something. Did I show you that before?
No.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
That's a stunning piece.
I had a fellow called... Wally Harrington, I think his name was, who was an artwork collector, and he knew Dick Sprang, and he told Dick Sprang that I was a big fan of his, and Dick very kindly did that. Look at that. That's one of my greatest treasures, actually.
That's really beautiful. And his inking just got better with age. Like in those 90s when they had him do some of the Two-Face Strikes Back or whatever covers,
Yes.
the precision is like Charles Burns lines with that brush.
That's right. Yeah. In fact, he wrote a letter to go with this, and we were just talking about lines, basically.
Wow.
He said he liked my lines. Anyway.
What a piece. Thank you so much, Brian.
Right. I've closed the book again, of course. Is it useful to hold up these pages to the screen for comparison? I suppose it can't hurt, can it?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's great to see it. I wish that we had one of those editions to be able to pull out, in reference, but it's awesome that you have that available and handy.
You need to buy one.
It's
I need
true.
more samples. I need more. I need more royalties.
I feel like this episode's going to sell a few extra copies.
Yeah, I think so. Higgins has the palette for his Batcave, and then we do have a different color palette here. Barbara Gordon in kind of her colors, right? Like Yvonne Craig from the Batman '66 show. It was yellow and purple.
Was it?
Pretty sure.
Now, when you get on to that second page there, I was very dissatisfied with the face I drew. So if you look at that, you'll see that I redrew the face. So when you're working on in Photoshop, when you're coloring in Photoshop, you can also just change the line around.
That's beautiful.
I thought I slightly improved the face there.
Are there? Did you do a bunch of that?
I'm sorry?
Did you do a bunch of that in this book?
Oh, yes. Yeah, there are occasions when I just change bits just to see whether anybody could spot the difference. In one scene, which I can show you, one of the characters acquires a pair of glasses. I'd have to go through it to remind myself where the changes occur, but they are there.
This is the difference between an artist and a guy just doing a job, man, because I can't imagine DC gave you much more money to do that. It seems like you might have taken that upon yourself to do that without even questioning it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I just got the coloring rate. I can't remember what it was.
That's the difference, my friends. When we have those kinds of conversations.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was my pet project, The Killing Joke. I mean, it was me that wanted to do it, and I wanted Alan as the writer, and it wasn't the other way around. So it was always a very, what is the word? I was always very precious about it being. I thought it was going to be the best thing I could do. I wasn't going to get any better than this.
One of the other key pieces to this 3-page sequence with Commissioner Gordon, Barbara, and inevitably Joker is pay attention to the scissors in Gordon's hand the entire time, because there's sort of acting stuff happening the entire time. He's cutting stuff out in the first page. And then we have Gordon advancing on Joker after the shot. You see the scissors in hand, but when the thug punches him in the stomach, boom, dislodges the weapon.
Yeah, where are we? I'm looking at it in reverse. Oh, here we are, yeah. I'm getting a mirror image. It's because it's like I'm looking in a mirror, so I can't actually.
Right.
But that's the bit we're talking about, isn't it? And again, you see, I think, am I on the right page here? Yes, I am. I think that's too pink. I think John's version of that is too pink for
It's
me.
very orange.
Yes, orange, yeah.
Your recolor job makes this scene much more clear. Ed, you're talking about scissors, and it's like they really pop. On the recolored version, they're almost practically black against that light background. And I look at this and I think, like, do you color it in this somewhat monochromatic orange and pink to almost push the violence back down a little bit?
It feels like heat, like emotion. Like this is a fiery sequence.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very. I find it more alarming in the recolor version.
Yeah, such a brutal drawing, right there, with the mascara running and stuff.
Yeah. I'm not a very subtle. I'm not actually very good at color. I don't notice color. And my wife is a painter, and she knows all about color. But to me, the sky is blue, water is blue, Superman is blue and red. But then these are colorists who can throw an ambient color all over as like an atmospheric over things. I wouldn't know how to do that somehow. So, I mean, to me, she's got a slightly mauve, brown. Her skirt is that color. Her shirt is yellow, and everything. There isn't any sort of ambient light changing anything here at all. He wears a brown vest, as you'd call it, and so it's got to be brown. Really don't know why the Joker was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and shorts. I don't know.
Brian, do you remember whenever you were drawing this scene, was it difficult to draw? Did it feel like sometimes I'll draw something and it'll be like, I need it for the story, but also it's painful to draw, or it's a character obviously suffering or violence is shown there. Is that anything that you would react to in any of your art making?
Well, as I said, I was a little bit shocked to find what we were doing to Barbara, but I saw no reason to say, no, I'm not doing this.
Right.
And, if it's a violent scene, it's going to have to look violent.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to hold back on it. But, I mean, to some extent, I once said that doing this kind of thing, you've got to be a little bit of a method actor. So when I'm drawing the Joker, for instance, I'm sort of almost pulling the face to draw the face. So to some extent, you've got to identify with Barbara in this moment. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. I feel like we should look at this page, this spread in black and white, because what's happening is we could show off so many different textures that Brian is bringing to the spread. So, like, I'm looking at, like, the mesh of this guy's shirt. I'm looking at this kind of wicker texture here. This guy's suit is different than that guy's shirt. We have the kind of Louis Vuitton pattern of the handbag here. You're bringing so much to the table, plus lots of black. This completely works as a black and white image that doesn't need to have color applied to it at all.
Well, that was my training as a British comic artist. Since all of our work was for Judge Dredd was in black and white. I did one story in color, but they had to work in black and white. So I had to. In doing this, I can't actually see the. Oh no! Decline.
It's John Higgins on the phone.
I forgot what we're talking about now. It's thrown me completely off. Yeah, these pages. And again, you see, this is a page that I kind of decolored. You see, so that only bits of it are in color. The sort of shrimps, would you call those things?
Yeah.
And then, of course, finally the bright red hood.
Yeah, that's a good reveal for that hood.
Yeah, otherwise monochrome page. Yeah. I love these shrimps, by the way. There's great fun drawing the shrimps. And there's a very cruel transition coming up, isn't there?
Yes, sir. And the texture on that wicker looked like such a challenge to ink, like with those line weights, and it's just perfect.
Now the wicker, which is the wicker in the bowl?
The bowl, the basket, whatever.
Yeah, whatever that thing is, yeah. I did a... Let's see if I can find it. I recently did this penguin cover, and I got into the wicker. That's my chair.
Oh, my goodness.
Some artists are really, really good at, action and muscles. And I'm really into texture. I love drawing, finding a texture that's interesting and just getting into it.
I mean, back in probably still even the 70s, there's that one 2000 AD cover with the spaghetti monster. And I remember staring at that close and seeing the lighting in between noodles.
That's right.
So amazing.
That would have been another occasion when I drew the black bits between the noodles and not the noodles themselves.
Oh, absolutely. Like that's very clear there. Like, and it's like this guy, he drew every noodle, and like he didn't like lose the noodles in between other noodles. Like he finishes the noodle.
I was very pleased with that cover, and I don't know, the viewers are not going to know what we're talking about. I was very pleased with that cover, and I was at DC Comics in New York at one time, and somebody took a look at it and said, "Oh, another Italian stereotype." So I was rather crushed.
Wow.
See, that stuff was going on even in the 70s, but we could probably flash an image of that up ahead of time.
Okay. Where are we now?
We got the hospital sequence, and I remember seeing this face of Barbara when she's out and looking so close at it, because at that point I discovered duotone, the existence of duotone, and I'm like, ooh, maybe he used a little duotone. Nah, this is Brian Bolland. That's all by hand.
No, what are we talking? Which panel?
First panel of Barbara's face closed. She's got the little Batman's hands touching her face, and like I was studying like those eyelids, and thinking as a kid, like, is that same stuff the Turtles guys used for their grays? But it's not. That's hand done.
Yeah, I can't. There's no duotone on there at all. It's just line.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
We're getting another one of our Alan Moore transition sequences that would have been called out in the script, where we see Barbara's hands on the bat cape. You flip that page.
Yeah.
And you got the most disturbing characters in all of DC Comics, man. A bunch of Cupid doll. We call them little people these days, but they got a thyroid condition, and the pressures behind their eyes is severe.
Yes. In the script, they were called Huey, Dewey, and Louie, which we couldn't actually call them that because I think they are Disney characters, aren't they?
Yeah.
But I think they were identical. I don't remember what instructions I was given about these little guys, but I have got in the deluxe edition, or not the absolute edition. There are my original proposed. Proposals in pencil for these three guys. I don't know quite why they look like that. But...
they look like progeria people. And I remember in those, like, in the late 80s, when talk shows in America were huge, they would wheel out as many progeria people as they possibly could. And this disease, it's like it advances your age by like 10 years for every year.
Oh, that. I didn't know. I know that condition.
Yeah.
I didn't know it called that. Yeah.
But that's sort of these faces. But this is another thing. Like this rogues gallery of freaks and stuff. I mean, you got your 10,000 hours practice in on that with like Judge Dredd and like the Forbidden Planet creatures and stuff.
Well, also I've got a copy of Todd Browning's film Freaks on the shelf, so I was very familiar with that. Have you ever seen that?
Love it. When the guy lights a cigarette, no arms or legs.
Oh God, Prince Ramdian. Yes.
Never forget that sequence.
That really disturbed me when I was very, very young when I saw that, because it was bad. I think that film was banned for about 30 or 40 years.
Was it a British video nasty?
Well, somebody decided that it was just not fit for sensitive folk to see, so it was not available for many years. Like Clockwork Orange, I think was stopped, wasn't it, for a long time?
Because of your like realistic lighting, realistic proportions, all that stuff, when you draw this disturbing shit, it's kind of extra disturbing.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. That makes me very pleased that you're extra disturbed.
And just like the 2000 AD spaghetti conversation, the shadows underneath all the Cupid dolls, that level of detail. Yes. But it's still so clear. That's the thing. It's still so clear. You know the exact right economy, Like you're very deft at doing hatching, but you're not doing so much hatching on those little dolls. You know that it's going to reproduce small and get lost in the clutter.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, and by the way, that those lights at the back there, that would have been craft. We would call that craft tint, which is it's not like lettret or zippertone. It's kind of white dots, which if you press the back of the thing, the dots will come out on the paper.
That's amazing.
So I sort of pasted the what did I just call it?
Craft tint.
Craft tint, or whatever it was called. And then I drew those kind of arches with the back end of a brush, I think, so that those lights kind of stuck to the page. So that is an occasion when I'm putting white on black.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I would never guess that. Me either. I've never heard of that. That's really cool.
I think it was called Craft Tint. Now you see, Craft Tint might be the name of the duotone board you're talking about.
Yeah, that's the company that did the duotone boards.
Yeah.
But yeah, I digress.
All those mechanical, like so much of that mechanical art stuff is just gone now. Any of the like the rub on or the adhesives or the cutouts, like, that stuff is such a bygone era. You know,
You were talking the other day about a Judge Death poster I drew, and it had a lot of fluffy stuff, sort of smoky stuff around the bottom, and you were speculating about how I did that. And I used a kind of Hessian rag to do that. Do you know what I'm talking about? So you sort of you paint a little bit of ink on this Hessian rag, which you have in your hand,
Right.
and then you sort of just dab it on the page, and it gives you dots basically that you get from the texture of Hessian.
It's so cool, like, because of the precision of your art, and that seems like a little bit of a chaotic practice to.
Well, you'd have to use what was this called?
Frisket?
That was called frisk film, to mask out the bits you don't want to plaster.
I see.
I mean, when you use an airbrush, most of the time is spent sticking that stuff on and cutting in round shapes.
Right.
And then you use the airbrush. Yeah.
it's no wonder we've all gone so digital these days.
Yeah, but then you don't got that sexy artwork though, to put on a wall though, man. The foggy glass right there, that texture. It's not a texture you use very often in this comic, but it's so effective. We all know what that glass is, and then when you examine it close and you just see those marks, you know, show us what the heck we can accomplish with these tools.
Yeah. That was a brush. I think that was all done with a brush.
The acting on our hoods right here when the cops come by is just fantastic.
Pulling the hat down.
Yeah, I like the guy who's pretending not to be involved in that, and the other guy sort of pulling his hat down,
Just trying to teleport his face in the other room.
Yes,
and
you
then,
can imagine that. You can imagine that in a kind of film noir kind of gangster movie, couldn't you? Really?
all of this acting too, like the detective who remains so stoic, giving such bad news, takes a drag on the cigarette, lights it. Just matter of fact, man. Dropping the facts and then letting the guy deal with it.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's
Somebody actually said that the other guy with the other gangster with a more sort of sharp chin looked more like the Joker than our guy from. But our guy who ended up as the Joker needed to look like a bit of a nobody.
My friends and I, like, you know, born in 1982, grew up in that Nintendo era. We called these guys Mario and Luigi. Right here, man. You got the little fat dude with the bowler hat, and you got the tall, lanky fella.
Yeah.
There they are. Mario
Yes, that's
and
right. The guy on the right with the sharp chin looks more like the more jokery, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Really, but he isn't. Yeah.
This next page is something that I'm very excited to talk to you about, and it's something that we probably talked about off camera with friends and peers and things, like where you have this Joker up on a screen, and you create the sort of interlace lines that a cathode ray tube television would have had, but in the fourth panel there, we see those lines in perspective.
Yes.
So how did you accomplish that? Would this be another Letratone screen?
No, this will be. Do you know? I'm going to have to guess. They're very precise, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, I would imagine I did on this occasion use white lines. Because I couldn't have got a screen that was in perspective. I think I would have had to have taped one end of the ruler on the right and sort of swiveled it gradually and drawn a white line with a ruling pen, with a technical pen.
Amazing. We spent 10 minutes on that before we got this camera set up. And by the way, I'm right.
Oh. Yeah, I was speculating it might have been one of those screen tones that radiates out from a center point.
No, I wouldn't know where to find such a thing.
Wow. That's unbelievable. Well done.
No, thank you. Tar very much.
So now we get to the real brutality.
Yeah.
Of the piece, man.
Yeah, mine is pink, but not quite as pink as John's version. Now, the thing is, there is a version of that middle panel where you get to see her topless, and
It's
I'm
in
not
here.
sure.
Like you see her boobs right there by the.
Yeah, but the central panel was redrawn. It was a sort of top half of her naked, basically, lying on her back, and somebody called it in, and so I stuck that piece of paper with another drawing on top. Although it can be seen. I really don't know why. Since I covered it up pretty quickly, why the topless version of that is available occasionally. I couldn't say where, but yeah, it is a bit brutal, isn't it?
The
You get to
lighting
see the
on these
bottom.
faces and the way you constructed these faces, the woman in agony, the Jim Gordon stuff,
Yeah,
just amazing lighting, and you really feel the emotion there.
I must say, when I was looking at this morning, and as I say, I don't look at this very often. I was rather pleased with that top right face of Gordon.
Really solid.
Mm,
Yeah, it's amazing. Brian, replacing this middle panel, were you
yeah.
like occasionally I've had to make changes, for editorial reasons, and I always think like, okay, you've got to make the replacement better somehow. When you look at this now, do you wish it was the original image, or do you find this? Are you happier with this version?
I think this version works very well. If anything, it's more disturbing because well, it's still going on. What's going on is still going on, and you just get to see her face. Now, I've said this occasionally, but the cover of this thing is so familiar, and I don't think Alan told me what to do. I think the cover was entirely me, but it's a kind of a slightly funny, smile and all that sort of stuff. But what's actually going on in that moment is the very worst moment in the story, isn't it? And you don't know that. It's a kind of a flippant. You think, oh, there's the joke over the camera. But it's only when you know what he's photographing inside that you realize that it's rather horrific, really.
Yeah, man, couldn't have that reflection in that lens. That's for sure. This is the
Yeah.
part we were talking about this comic earlier, and the descent of like taking Gordon basically through Dante's Inferno here, man. The 7 stages. So each time he's going through this door,
Yeah.
to my imagination, like if this is the first thing that Joker shows him, it's just getting increasingly worse and worse and worse as they go through.
I hadn't really considered what was going on there. Really, it was just a way of showing that he was going through this ghost train ride, as we call it, and meanwhile the Batman is trying to find him.
In this very last panel, we were talking about Frisket not too long ago, and is this like a spatter where you use different Friskets, like you mask off the
Yes.
bat signal, and then you take it off, and then mask it the other way so that you could get the.
This looks like toothbrush to me. Yeah, as you say, where is it? You mask it off, and then you put ink on a toothbrush and you flick it.
Right.
That's a fairly common thing we used to do.
Not just the.
And it's still a.
Go ahead.
It's still an effect that I find very difficult to achieve on a computer. I mean, there's a lovely randomness about using a toothbrush and a spatter effect, which you can't get on a computer. I've tried, and I've actually created several sheets of spatter, which I save as files in Photoshop, which I can use as backgrounds on my digital work.
Yeah, just a couple more examples of the spatter technique on these pages.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Ed, with your reading of these levels being like, worse and worse and worse, it really makes this sequence so much more disturbing to read it that way, where it's like it's another page of going through level after level after level.
And how many?
That's
right?
what I'm saying.
6.
It's,
so the other one was 7, and then you spit out. It's the 7 layers, dude. I'm telling you, like that was. If it's not in the script, man, I think that more was channeling that a little bit.
Well, I'd never considered that. There are 7 levels.
We've studied this thing meticulously. We're fucking nerds over here, Uncle Brian.
So what are the seven? Is it seven levels into hell or
Something
what?
like that. How's it go?
Yeah, is it circles or seven?
Seven circles. Yeah.
That Dante's Inferno or something?
Yeah.
No, okay.
And then when he spit out, just a shell of a man.
Yeah, yeah.
I always joked, and I might have said it on the previous, but like when they put Gordon in the bondage stuff, and he's always cut off at the waist, or so you never see like the butt cheeks. Like I just imagine you could, and the audience who has some drawing proficiency, they could run wild with this. But I just imagine what's happening on the other side, because I'm imagining they're flaying that dude in half in certain spots. I'm imagining they're jamming stuff into orifices. And
My God,
like
you're sick. You're sick, aren't you? You've been thinking about all this stuff.
Let's see that fan art.
Yeah, it feels like we don't need more of that in this story.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's way more brutal than what you get to see inside the drawing.
Right.
What an amazing reflection. Having the title of the processing plant backwards in the reflection, like in that, toxic waste.
It's even in perspective a little bit.
Is that? Yeah, I guess you're right, yeah.
Look at it. Oh, I was going to say, did it flip around? And is it properly visible that way? Yeah, it's even...
Which one are you talking about, Mike, or what?
Yeah. But yeah, it's even in a little bit of perspective. Once again, is that lettering your hand, Brian?
It will be, but yeah, it will be. Because I've got the Spanish edition, so it still says Ace Chemical something.
I feel like it would be sacrilegious, man, if they would change that up and like destroyed some of your raindrops. They have to leave that. A lot of tech pen on these 2 pages with the backgrounds.
With all those pipes and stuff, yeah, there must have been, yes, yeah.
Yeah, so clean.
And as you see, gradually we're getting more and more red into the monochrome pages. That was always my intention. Yeah.
Yeah, really well done. You see a little bit of foreshadowing stuff. You see that spade on that barrel right there.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really looking at this properly for the first time in ages, so it's looking quite fresh to me.
Brian, we're so honored too. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, that's okay.
Check out that Golden Age Batman, Jimmy. Look at that guy. He's got that primitive, kind of Bob Kane-ish costume right there.
Yes.
Genius.
Now, why has he suddenly acquired long ears? Did he have long ears throughout this? I think he was going through the long-eared period, wasn't he? I think Batman's ears got longer and shorter depending on whether it was Frank Miller or
right. And this is still that throwback. So this is before the Batman that is running around in this issue already. But like, yeah, that old Batman, they were really trying to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a good one for a monster. Like if you think of Joker's perspective at this point when he sees Batman in that point of view shot, those big points really are monstrous, like satanic almost.
Oh, the devil's coming.
Yeah, that's
you're
right.
Seeing it in red.
Yeah.
And
I was very pleased with the colouring on that panel. Not only do we get the red creeping into the monochrome, but we get a little bit of green from the chemicals.
Absolutely, man. And, you're drawing there. Like, of course, everybody recognizes the very next page with the Joker Mania, but the gestures and the pose of the Red Hood crawling out of the chemicals, that is very sharp drawing. Great drapery on the back,
Okay,
on the cape and stuff. So, Brian, did you draw these pages in order from page 1, 2, 3, like that, or did you bounce around a little bit?
No, I always drew things in order. I always do things in order.
Okay, so you do that very first panel. See, that was a leading question. Like if I was a prosecutor or something, I'm setting you up. Because on panel 1, so you're drawing all the black. I'm talking about panel 1, page 1. You're drawing all the black and not using white ink on these raindrops.
That's right, yeah.
So when you do that, and then you get to this page, like that experience with panel 1, page 1 wasn't enough of a bitch for you to then use some white on the circles. Like you still had to you had to use black. and just trace and color that way?
Yeah, that's
Amazing.
the way I did it. I mean, I don't know how I would have. You see, whiteout is very unpleasant stuff. It doesn't behave like ink.
Right.
You don't have control. It's very chalky and very dry, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't think I'd have enough control to draw those circles in white with whiteout.
Amazing. It's just so fascinating to hear the double lighting, like on that last face. That sort of makes that image. You know, that shadow from that nose on the teeth.
Yeah.
And when you make Joker at his craziest, it's the only time in a Brian Bolland drawing where you see all the white around the iris. We'll see it a couple other times with the Joker at his most maniacal. Like, you really save that. A lot of people will draw, you know, the complete white around a character's eyes, but that's the most maniacal it can get.
Oh, I've seen some pretty maniacal Jokers in my time. He's looking pretty scary in various iterations of the Joker recently, I will say. Yeah.
I love your choice in your color version to do red is like seeping out of his eyes. I think that really sells like the chemical burns and just, you know, pain.
Yes.
Like that
Yeah,
looks
well, his eyes are bleeding, aren't they? So,
yeah, it looks like that hurts bad.
It just seems... It does.
And then studying like the lighting of the hair in that image is so sharp also. You know, once again, it's the spaghetti, like just that stuff that a lot of people consider incidental. Like Brian Bolland he's lighting it all. If he's drawing it, he's being accurate with it. Even like literally even the buttons on the shirt and having they're in proper perspective. You know, you're looking sort of down, so the down plane is darker that way. It's all there.
You know, I said I tend not to paint white over black when I was using real world tools, but now that I'm using a computer, I can actually put, you know, white over a lighter color over the top of a darker color. So in the case of the coloring of the hair, you know, I do like to add. It's getting blurry, isn't it? I do like. There's a. Well, it's got a name. It's basically a lightening or a darkening tool in Photoshop, and I use the lightening tool to go over the green hair to give it a gloss, give it a shine.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Now that I'm using Photoshop, and of course, you know, to remind everybody, all this was colored in Photoshop.
Right.
Yeah.
Brian, did you draw the ha-has in the background? Is that part of your original art, or is that something that was added by a letterer?
Do you know, I cannot remember. Looking at it, I'm having... They're very, very sharp, aren't they? I can't see any...
Check out the next page, too, because it's really incorporated into the artwork on the very next page, panel 1.
It is. I kind of think it was me, but Richard may be able to give us the definitive answer on that, Richard Starkings.
Were you able to hand these pages off to Richard in person, or you had to mail them off in post?
In person, I think I was living in London and he was living in Reading, and we used to meet up and play softball together in Hampstead Heath, and I think they were just being handed over because he would do the lettering and I would... Because if you look at the 2008 Judge Dredd Apex book, you'll see that all the lettering balloons basically, are stuck on. But I think in the case of this, Richard did the lettering. Would he have done the balloons? I can't remember. And then I would draw into the rest of the space. But he may have a better memory of that than me. I can't be sure.
So he was lettering it, you would pencil, he would letter, you would get the pages back in ink.
I think that was the way it worked, yes. Looking at these pages, that was clearly done that way, because there's no, the bubbles, the balloons, whatever, they're not stuck on. There's nothing stuck on here. So whoever lettered this, I can't remember who it was actually, would have done it first, and then it would have come back to me, and I would have drawn the rest.
Man, such gorgeous pages.
Yeah, I was looking at that building in the top panel.
Amazing.
It's like a photograph.
Amazing.
Stunning.
So we got the freaks. Oh my goodness, I gotta zoom in on that again.
Don't know where I found that building. It doesn't look America. Where do you see buildings like that in America? I'm not really too sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
You see them in Gotham City.
That's right.
Oh, good. That's where you see them. Good.
There we go, man. The Forbidden Planet Freak Show. Right there, panel 1, 2.
I'll close the book again. What page are we on?
We are on the intro of the Batmobile page. No page
We're on the
numbers on
Batmobile.
this guy.
Yeah. Now that is very much a Dick Sprang Batmobile, isn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, I went really retro with the Batmobile. That wonderful thing from the Dick Sprang era, 50s, with that
Absolutely, man.
ridiculous long front. And fortunately, I didn't have to draw it very often.
Capture
Not very
fun
practical.
design.
I mean, to me, that is pure Dick Sprang. The silhouette of Batman in there is so not realistic, but
Right.
to me, it's Dick Sprang.
Capturing that glint of the headlights like that with the straight edge. Once again, you're not using white to like on the entire drawing. Like this little triangle is getting drawn by hand in black. Like all this background stuff, that's all just black ink.
Yes, I mean, if you've got the black and white version there,
Yes.
you'll see that I just left spaces where it wasn't. You know, I just drew the black bits.
Amazing.
There's no white on there at all.
You know, it's
Yeah.
such an exceptional comic in terms of the art, Brian. And you saying that stuff, it just, man, you sell it even harder by like letting us know that.
Good.
A screen that I didn't even notice in the color version when I look at the black and white, and it looks like it's just like a 10% black
Oh,
screen.
yeah,
you know,
right.
Really light. Man, what detail. What subtle detail.
I'm trying to see it myself. Are there some parallel lines on there? It's probably some kind of
It's
stick-on
dots.
thing.
Yeah, little dots. I
Oh,
assume
is
it's
it?
the electrotone,
Yes.
kind of screen tone. This
That's right.
image of Batman here in the very last panel, is that an homage to the Batman Year One cover? There was a cover that was real similar to that on one of the Batman Year One trade paperbacks.
Well, I was very aware that Frank had done this definitive Batman. In fact, did I tell you that I was before I started it? I may have just started this, and I was in New York, and I knew Frank. Frank used to come and visit in London, and I met with Frank and Lynn Varley, my wife, and four of us met up for a Japanese meal, and he asked me what I was doing, and I said, I'm doing a Batman graphic novel. And he said, don't you think there's been enough of those? But it was already started, so I've not really seen him much since, so I don't know what he thought of it, really, but it does seem excess to, more than is required.
Well, I mean, geez, look at where we're at now. I think that's only what DC makes now is Batman comics,
Yeah,
right?
really. Feels like it.
Yeah, I think so. Well, this thing seems to be is Batman Year One? No, Year One and the other things he did, Dark Knight. Are they continually in print?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think both of those two pretty much steady ever since. You know, it's
And-
constantly whatever, when they can roll out like a 10-year anniversary edition, a 20-year anniversary edition, you know, it's quite a few of them. I think I probably own Year One in, I don't know, 4 or 5 different formats.
How can you not, man? And just looking at that absolute Killing Joke, it's like I'm getting that.
Yeah.
I'm getting that before
you
the
need-
video's done. I want that script.
Yeah, I want to see the pencil
I think-
pages.
I think you need one for every member of your family. Actually.
Yeah, see, that's the other thing, man. When you have like those Apex edition, you got a $100 book. A royalty on a $100 book that's a fun royalty, man. The Cartoonist's Christmas is not in December. It's when you get the Q4 royalty check in March.
That's right.
Like, that is Cartoonist Christmas. This 2-page spread is something that I stared at and studied so much, man. Like, I got this comic in the 90s when Image was the big shit, you know? And just, like, every striation, every muscle. And the back of these legs, where you're not drawing all the quads, the way the ankle connects in the back of the leg there is something that, like I study, nobody in comics knows how to draw that except right here. So there's that piece that I loved. Seeing the shadow on the ripped costume was something that I paid a lot of attention to. And a lot of people that try to style bite Brian, I swear they use this image right here and try to capture that kind of lighting and modeling of the face.
Mm-hmm. Somebody once said, in fact it's often said, that I always light everything from the top left. So I don't really have to think about it. Right. I tend to always do that. Although the exception was that double lit Crazy Joker thing earlier, wasn't it?
And maybe that's one of those effective things where if you have this reliable kind of light source, when you change it, it's a subconscious thing. It's subtle to people. They don't know what's different, but that just adds to the texture of it all.
Yeah.
Do you remember for that double lit Joker face? Did you do photo reference for that? Like set up lights and try to figure that out? Man, I would always puzzle over that stuff. Ed, you mentioned like Image Comics and stuff, and they would do double lighting and stuff, and I would try so hard to figure that out, and it was so difficult.
It feels so accurate too, Brian, and it makes me like I remember when Bernie Wrightson was promoting that Frankenstein book that he did. He was showing off, like he would make sculptures of the Frankenstein head and shine light on it to try to get that stuff accurate. So you didn't do any of that kind of thing for that, just straight off the top of the head?
No, I don't recall using any photo reference for faces anywhere in this.
Nice.
That's amazing.
But it's another thing. People mentioned that I guess maybe they got like a little drawing from you at a convention or something, and it's not. There's never a little drawing. Like they said that you would like map out. It would be in the comments of some of these videos. You would do that thing that artists do, where like you're like measuring proportions and like building these faces. So is that something you do? Do you have like a real academic approach to the initial drawing?
I do place good drawing quite highly. I think some other people say that the storytelling is the most important thing, but I would put decent drawing on a par with that. I do find, and I'm not going to name names, but there are some artists who probably tell the story terrifically well, but I look at the drawing and think, no. I think I told you the story before, but I got at school, I got a B in art and an A in technical drawing. So I always had this technical precision that I like to. I had to draw technical drawings of truncated cones and things of that sort in isometric projection. So I had to learn that sort of thing. But I think in the case of drawing here, I'm fluffing it quite often. I'm sort of making it up. Things wouldn't really look like that. Which page are we on, by the way? Let's have a look. Oh yes, here we are. I don't think the bottom panel on the left is very good. But anyway,
it's so stark and striking, and it surprises me to hear.
Yeah, that feels like maybe that's one that goes in the storytelling side, because it feels so dramatic.
I mean, he's definitely coming at you, isn't he?
And those faces in perspective, that is no easy feat. Certainly in a 1986, 87, when you're drawing this, like now you could fudge that. You could take it, use a distort tool, and if you're gonna use real pen and ink, you could just print it on blue line and ink that way. You did not have that at your disposal here. So that's very noteworthy.
No, which faces are we talking about? Are we talking about the ones in the crazy mirrors with the eyes?
Yeah, those bottom panels in the next pages and stuff.
Yes, I suppose so. No, they are pretty much improvised. They didn't need to be precisely drawn faces. So I just, and again, look, we've got a very orange panel there. You see?
Oh yeah.
I just returned him to his blue and his grey, because that's what a colour I think he is.
Yeah. In the Higgins version, the lights are still turned on inside that weird ride.
Well, I suppose if you're inside a crazy house, then I can see the argument for having everything in purple. But it seemed to make it clearer to have it the way I did it. But there you go.
from a drawing standpoint, the faces as a background that you're running through these hallways of these nightmarish faces.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a great visual.
And as a piece of technical drawing, as we were talking before, look at these like little sticks in perspective with accurate lighting going the correct direction.
Yes.
Yeah, I bet a lot of cartoonists would see that in a script and not look forward to drawing it.
What a tough drawing, man. The sort of worm's eye view of Joker kind of approaching crotch level, getting it's that neck. Like a lot of guys screw up that part. Like, how do you put that head on top of those collarbones? But it turned out so good here.
I must say the crotch up shot and then the looking down on him. It must have been Alan telling me to do that. I wouldn't have thought of that myself. I don't think.
There's no reliable camera angle. Like it's a complete madhouse at this point, and I think that communicates that really well. And in fact, like whenever like there would be storytelling courses and things, they would tell you don't change the angles so severely if you're trying to just. It could take people out of the moment, but using it strategically at that level makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think.
Can I just show you the my colouring version of this bit here? I was rather pleased with that bit of lettering. That is my lettering there, and I noticed in the colour that I gave it a sort of a glinting edge, if you can see what I mean. And then there's quite a bit of airbrushing, not airbrushing because I'm in Photoshop here. You see, on the Joker's here, which. I don't think, I mean, that's drawing really. I don't think, I can't remember how it compares to Alan's version.
Brian, whenever you color your stuff, there's always a little bit of noise in the color. And how do you achieve that? Do you have some speckly paper that you sample or?
There is actually a tool in Photoshop. There's loads of filters and one of them is noise.
And you can.
You can use that, yes. Yeah. I'm getting quite lazy, actually. I don't always remember to do that. I think all those recent Batman villain covers I did, I'm not using the noise very much. But I do also have real-world backgrounds that I've painted. I've painted in the real world, like canvas textures and various textures that look as if I may have painted them. And I just place them in backgrounds and so on. So I've got a file full of textures that are available.
And for the people at home, what I mean by that is you could have your standard computer color where you just like lay in a flesh tone and it's very precise and perfect. But in Brian's work, you will see a kind of like a speckly texture or something like that. What's the argument for doing that? Because I have my own thoughts about that, but what's the argument for adding that little bit of noise? And texture.
Well, when I first noticed that colorists were using computers to color my line work, it all looked very smooth and glitzy and glossy, and I didn't really like it. If you can fool people into thinking you actually done it by hand on paper, it always does look better. So. That's my argument for that. I mean, but obviously some textures, like a person's suit, a coat, will have texture in it, won't it? It won't be completely smooth.
Right.
So you need to add a little bit of texture on flesh too, really.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to show you the comparison, the different kind of colour. John's green panel and my grey one, I said.
There it is, matched right up.
Yeah.
And for the people playing at home, Brian it does look like he's using straight edges even on some of that broken glass.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, whenever there's a straight line, I'm going to have to use a straight edge.
Love it.
And a repeatograph. Yeah. You can't draw a straight line with a brush.
Yeah, and I would tell everybody, go back and pause some of these blow-ups of this spread because I'm so impressed with like the reflections. And whenever he is purple against the green, you lose some of what the madness of that drawing is. But in black and white or in a more realistic...
Is that what you're showing off here?
It is. I just think like this is one of my favorite panels, of any comic. And it has
which one are you...
It's the bottom left, yeah. Because it just captures the funhouse mirror part. And there's a joy in the drawing there, at least as a reader appreciating it. Really love that, seeing the back of him. Just a very cool piece. And it changes dramatically with with the Higgins color, that particular panel. You know, it doesn't look as much like a reflection, or at least it doesn't all blend together like sort of, you know, a madhouse,
Yeah.
if you will.
Flip that page, man, because we're getting to another one that is like one of those pages that I just studied endlessly for the draftsmanship of it, and it's all lighting based. It's the tension on the cowl. It's that little piece of white that's left inside the eyelid that is skin.
Yes.
It's the lighting on the cowl getting knocked down on his face with that underpiece with the nose, and still the lighting on the ripped up part of the spandex. It feels like fabric. Like that shirt feels like cloth.
Yes, I love the idea, Alan's idea of having him sticking his fingers in the eye sockets.
Oh, it's genius, because like I could see anybody who's like we've in America, just Batman is always there, so that would like never occur to you to like do something like that. But you guys like having that little bit of remove, like, oh, he just has a mask on. Well, stick your fucking fingers in his eye.
It's a great 3-panel sequence too, as he's trying to adjust it, and the Joker's loading up with that piece of wood behind him. It's such a great natural body language, everything.
And I think this is going to be Brian telling us in the 5th panel, right above the one where he gets clobbered, where did you use rapidograph on with those background lines?
On again.
The panel.
This one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Did I use
for those grays?
Well, probably. I mean, all those planks. Are you talking about all those kind of vertical planks and things? Yes,
well,
that will be.
Yeah, there's a lighter gray value. You like it's not the individual planks, but it's the gray that is created as like a shading element of those planks. I mean, they're lines that are a millimeter apart.
Oh God, yes, they're hand drawn.
Wow,
amazing.
I think I don't remember having any zipper toe. Oh, I don't know. Might be, because I really couldn't say. I'd have to look at the artwork, which I don't have.
The other question, I mean, if that was the case, if they were hand drawn, like you're laying down a ruler and then you're just measuring every other millimeter and then drawing a line, like.
I mean, I did have a ruler that had wheels in it, so you could slide it along and it would remain parallel. I may have used that. I don't know.
Wow.
I couldn't be sure. I may be telling a fib here. It's either stuck on or I drew it. I can't remember which. Yeah. Of course, my pages aren't quite as purple.
Right. Yeah, look at that.
There you go.
Yes, sir. You save one image pretty much in its entire, well, 2 images for some intense, nearly Kirby-like foreshortening. Going full, like we remember you did like a thesis piece on Neil Adams. And Neil Adams would do this. He would have that realistic kind of figure drawing, but then he would push the proportions in interesting ways. And you saved that for this moment. Do you think that was a script choice, or you chose to do these bits right here?
Now, which moment are you talking about here?
The big wind-up punch, when he hits Joker on the bingo button, knocks him out the window.
What are you asking me again?
The foreshortening on the fist, and the kind of the foreshortening on the Joker. It's the only time you have an extreme foreshortening of this kind in the entire story, and it seems like you saved it up for this moment.
Well, I mean, there isn't really a lot of action a lot of the time, is there? And throughout the whole thing, there isn't really a fight scene until you get to this bit. But it would have been Alan instructing me. There's a big fist in the foreground.
Wow.
He knocks him out. I must say, I was very pleased with these 2 pages.
So good.
I mean, the knife fight, I think, kind of. Panel 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, where he's punching him in the stomach. You can't actually see his arm, can you?
Right. Yeah. No, that's so sharp too.
It's a great fight scene. I'm actually working on a Switchblade fight scene this week, and I may be stealing from this sequence a little bit. It's really great though.
And Brian established that he carries his hand reference on him. He's got a pair. Mm-hmm. But you see the little wrinkles right there, man? I'm imagining you had some kitchen made dinner, like a dishwashing gloves on, to get those little wrinkles? Because that's a real piece of observation right there.
Gloves are really quite interesting because they're a lot more interesting than. I mean, we tend to just draw hands and then put wrinkles in them. I mean, I think I was drawing Spirit for a bit. I did some covers and some interiors on Spirit. I think he has a pair of gloves with those three funny little
Like the Mickey Mouse lines
on the back. But if you can take the time to draw a glove looking like a real glove, you don't have to do that with Batman because everything's skin tight, really, isn't it? Well, in this era, it was. So you can pretty much draw a hand and then add a few wrinkles.
It's a great 2-page spread for the costume part. You know, for the glove, for the mask, for that sense that, like, he is wearing this costume, and let's have some fun with that costume.
Absolutely.
It's a funny thing that for all these years we've been quite okay with superheroes wearing trunks. But somebody said that it was only because of Tarzan that all these kind of heroic figures had to wear trunks. There's no reason why Superman or, sort of sort of underpants outside of his pants, as it were. But for a long time, you didn't. All of these characters, the Manhunter from Mars, all those characters, they all wore those kind of trunks, I suppose.
One of the great connections between superheroes and wrestling.
That's true.
It's the same because they're bigger than underwear. Those trunks usually. Like now, who knows? Everybody's drawn superheroes a million ways. But they used to be big. They were almost shorts that they would all wear.
Maybe it's wrestling. Maybe that's where the story came from, that superheroes came out of the wrestling world, really. Stuff. Yeah. Now, are we ready for the next page?
Yes,
we're on the next. Now, if anything, this is my favourite moment in the whole book, where he gets the gun out. It's the same gun. It's the one that did terrible things to Barbara. And a comedy effect comes out of it.
Right.
And the thing that I like the most is that he seems surprised. He says, "Damn, it was empty."
He's just out of his mind, man.
Which is just another level of madness that I think actually outstrips all of the previous moments of madness. And he looks genuinely crushed that the gun is empty.
That third panel on that page might be the most maniacal. That might be more maniacal than that double lit reveal of the origin. He looks around the bend.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he? I mean, he's crushed and also mad at the same time, isn't he? Really.
That's another one of those, Ed, where you're seeing the whole white around the iris.
It is, and the full acting of it, of just like the body turning second by second to the amount of time between panel 1 and 2 is very close. But then he flips around really fast here.
Yes.
The gun.
Yeah, when he pulls that gun out.
And he's had that whole knife fight scene, and hitting him with a plank, and he had a gun all this time.
Right.
Crazy, isn't it?
It's also an interesting panel with Batman's hands.
Yes.
There, because the menace is almost coming from both directions.
Right.
Which works well in this story, and well in that panel.
There's Kurtzman in that, man. We looked at that Corpse on the MGM strip where there's a rival soldier in the bush and trying to steal the rations, and you see those elements. Alan Moore would cite that a lot, and as being a Kurtzman in general as being a storytelling influence in comics.
Now, there's a detail I've got to draw your attention to, and that is that if you look at the last panel with the Joker there, you'll see that I changed his mouth.
Ah, yeah, dude, he's got the mouth open.
And I think somebody was discussing that I'd done it wrong, and I can't remember why I opened that. And I think it's because he's just thinking of the joke. And I don't know, for some reason I thought he would be beginning to smile. So a bit of a change there. One of several changes that I could have pointed out if I'd remembered.
And here we have the controversial finale. Brian, you must have heard the Grant Morrison interpretation of this finale. Where do you stand on that as the creator of the work?
Well, where I stand on it is that it was not in the script. There was nothing about a death scene in the script at all. all that was in the script that you see on the page. But there was a kind of bond kind of strikes up between the two of them, and he's really putting his hand on his shoulder. But somebody said that a novel, a piece of fiction, once it leaves the author, it can then take on a life of its own. So if people like Grant Morrison thinks there's something going on in there that I didn't know was going on in there, then it's in there. But I didn't know it was in there.
Yeah, that's very fair. And off the top, like, I don't remember exactly what he said. I just remember something about this is the last Joker story, Batman kills Joker. But are there any specific details he mentioned to go along with his thesis?
No.
Just the silence of the end. It was like his big thing.
I mean, in a way, the fact that Batman has a bit of a chuckle at the end is pretty controversial in itself, because he's almost kind of in on the bad stuff that the Joker has done, isn't he? In that moment,
this kind of is the part that kind of proves that you live long enough to become the villain, or in order for Joker to exist, there must be a Batman. There's like not a camaraderie, but there's certainly a yin and yang to these characters.
Yes.
And they're at the end of the day, they're both sickos in their own way.
I mean, we do know that Alan pretty much has disowned it. He doesn't really want to talk about it, and it's not included in his catalogue of his work, really, is it?
Right.
And he thinks that superheroes are pretty silly. I mean, I shouldn't be putting words in his mouth, because he's expressed these opinions, and I agree with them to a large extent.
Sure.
But I've always seen the relationship between Batman and the Joker as quite interesting. I see it as both sides of a kind of a mind. There's the sort of the rational, do the right thing side of a human brain, and then there's the sort of desire to sort of do for chaos, really, to create chaos. A part of us would like to create chaos. Part of us would like to walk up to somebody on a bridge and take hold of their feet and tip them over into the sea, into the river. But we don't, because we're just, the other part of us is dominant. So I see the relationship between these two characters, even though they're costume characters in a superhero comic, as two kind of psychological states. And I also see those two sides of two psychological states in Judge Dredd and Mega City and all the kind of crazies in Mega City. There's the sort of extreme order versus the chaos. And there's something about the chaos that appeals. Have I gone on long enough about that?
That's really fair. This page before the finale, where Joker's acting the stuff out, that is a page of Alan Moore's script that I've always wanted to read, because you see Joker in this performative way, and I would love to compare that with the final art to see what you brought to the table, what he instructed. And my final note that I'm very happy to say, with all the Brian Bolland inking the black around the water drops, that last panel is a photo stat, and I'm so thankful that you did that, because there's no reason to draw that panel 2 times.
I'm going back to the beginning to see whether that is true or not. It looks the same. Oh, yeah. No, actually, it doesn't. They're different.
Are they?
Oh, maybe not. Oh, yeah, no, I think they are the same, but they were coloured. In my version here, I think I put a little... Oh, I know what happened. The first panel has a car headlight in it, and the final panel doesn't. So it's the same drawing, but I've coloured it slightly differently in my coloured version. But I think you're right.
Which is good, because we might put you on that scale between Batman and Joker if you drew that panel 2 times. the way that you draw with the no white media. Brian Bolland, goddamn it, this is an amazing conversation, amazing experience. I gotta pinch
so much.
I gotta pinch myself.
Well, I can talk about myself endlessly, That's what I enjoy doing most. As my
Brian,
wife would point out to me. Yeah.
do you have some covers that have yet to get published? Anything upcoming that you can mention or talk about?
Well, there are two covers I've done for the Carol Day collection that we mentioned earlier. There are two covers for Steel Claw collections that are out already. Very nice editions from Rebellion, collecting Steel Claw stories, and I've done both of those covers as pretty much with swipes, really. In the case of the Carol Day, it's pretty much a series of swipes of David Wright's artwork, which I've copied meticulously. Quite a long job, really, trying to recreate exactly his lines. So we'll have to watch out for that. I did 8 Batman covers in the One Bad Day series, and I think I've got 5 or 6 of them now. I've just received a Catwoman one, which I forgot to put my name on. I emailed them and said, "Hey, how come my name isn't on that cover?" And it was me. I forgot to put it on. And there are 2 more to go. There's Clayface and Ra's al Ghul, is he called? And then I did another one, which is a Man-Bat cover. I seem to be just doing portraits of villains, basically. What else is there? I've just only today agreed to do another Wonder Woman cover because I think it's an anniversary of some sort. And I think the editor, who I didn't know, wants everyone who's done a bit of Wonder Woman things to contribute to it somewhere, so I'll do that. I feel very nervous, actually, because drawing beautiful women is a lot harder than drawing muck monsters.
Sure. When you were doing the Wonder Woman covers, did you have a reliable model?
I bought a lot of Vogue magazines, and there were certain models. There was somebody. Her name was Stephanie Seymour. I liked her face. I liked her nose, and I think I used her as. There was one I think was pretty much a swipe of her, the one with the flash on the cover, and he was eating spaghetti, more spaghetti. I think a lot of the time I was just using those faces as inspiration to try to make her look like that. But God, I'm out of practice. I'm not sure I can pull it off this time round. But that's what's coming up next. And apart from that, the Actress and the Bishop has been collected in an edition from Shift magazine, which is out at the moment. And I haven't got my copy yet. You must check that out.
Yes.
And also, I've got a pictorial memoir. Did I mention that?
You did.
Coming out in March, they say. Printed in Turkey. And it's a 350-page, 6-panel grid of photographs, documents, very little drawing, all about my life, really, or before my life, and then going through the 60s and the music of the time and what was on the television and the games and that sort of thing, it's going to be available, I hope, in March.
That sounds completely different than anything I've ever heard of. Is there something?
Yes, well, that's what they're saying. I mean, while I can still remember these things, I wanted to get it written down in case my son was ever interested. So it's a thing I've just been doing for 10 years, just filling these 6 panels and sometimes overlapping the panels with 3-dimensional effects. There's page 100 really covers my suddenly getting into American comics, and it's completely covered in hundreds of DC covers from my collection.
You post some of this on your social media, right?
I do, yeah.
Yes.
And I'm doing it for my own amusement, really, and also just to keep my memory going. And then when the Book Palace said they would publish it, I found it rather surprising, because why would anybody be interested in me? But also because they'd never seen such a thing. I mean, Dave Gibbons has got his memoir coming out around about the same time, and I don't know what that looks like. But in this case, it's picture-driven. I find the pictures, and then I talk about the occasion or the time that the pictures are from. So no one's ever seen a fat book of photographs like that sort of are narrated, as far as I know.
Wow, that sounds cool.
Yeah,
That's
very
exciting.
exciting. Are these photos
okay.
you've taken over the years and you've scanned them all from
Yeah.
that time period and stuff?
Yeah, I've been spending days and days and days scanning in slides and trying to get them in some kind of chronological order. But I mean, the photos I had when I was a kid on a Kodak Brownie camera, which is over there, some of those go in there, and then kids I was at school with, and that sort of thing.
Very exciting.
Yeah,
Very
that's
exciting.
awesome.
Like the photo memoir, the Dave Gibbons memoir. Like, it's so important to have these pieces, and I'm glad you're doing it.
And it's very not about comics.
Sure.
There's only occasional references. Oh, this is when I did my first 2000 AD cover in 1977 or something like that. But it's pretty. I think it looks nice. And a lot of the time, there are even some little subliminal messages saying you don't have to read this stuff. Just look at the pictures.
I got to see this.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah. Okay.
Brian,
Well,
Brian, thank you so much for joining us on the channel to go over one of your crown jewels of comics.
well, that's very kind of you to invite me.